particular lecture we are going to complete the group theory, and this is the final lecture of group theory, and in this lecture we will be studying about subgroup and alternating subgroup. Okay, so what is a subgroup and what is an alternating subgroup? This is what we are going to study now. So suppose we have a group G star. Okay, we have a group G star, and so this group is formed with the set G. This is the set G, and this is the binary operation or the binary composition. Okay, now suppose we have a set H. Suppose we have a set H such that H is a subset of G. Such that H is a subset of G, and we also find that H is associative, has a left identity, and every element of H has a left inverse. Okay, H is associative, has a left identity, and every element of H has a left inverse under the binary composition star. That is, we can say that H forms a group under the binary operation star. Okay, this group which is formed with the same binary composition as that of the group formed with G, and the set here containing a subset of G is said to be a subgroup of G star. Did you get it? A subset of elements of a group G star that is itself a group under star is called a subgroup of G. If I talk about the general definition, this is the description. Okay, I am re-explaining the description. Suppose we have a set G which forms a group under the binary composition star. Now we take a subset of G and find that the subset H also forms a group under the same binary composition star. When this condition satisfies, we say that this group formed with the subset of G is a subgroup of G star if the binary composition is also star itself. Okay, so if I talk about the main definition, we say that a subset of elements of a group G star that is itself a group under star is called a subgroup of G. Understood? This is the definition of a subgroup. Okay, and so if we talk about examples of subgroups, first we have many examples, many general examples. For example, we can say that additive group of integers. Additive group of integers is a subgroup of additive group of rationals. So understood what I meant to say? That is the additive group of integers, that is Z plus, which is a subgroup of additive group of rationals. Okay, so don't confuse with this symbol. This is not a symbol of subgroup. I just gave this symbol to make you understand that the additive group of integers is a subgroup of the additive group of rationals. The symbol of subgroup is given like this. Okay, is given like this. which is your less than sign. So if this subgroup is written with, say, suppose some you can no basically you can identify a subgroup with the help of the set also, with the help of a set also. Basically you can write that Z plus is a subgroup of additive inverse of rationals. Got it, guys? Clear? Now let us talk about improper or trivial subgroups and proper subgroups. So what are improper subgroups? See, if I have a group G star, then there are two groups. Basically, rather I would say there are at least two groups. Okay, one of which is the identity group, and the other is the group itself. You're getting my point? In a group G star, or rather you can call it in a group G, we will have at least two subgroups. One is your identity subgroup and one is the group itself. These two subgroups are called trivial subgroups. Okay, trivial subgroups or improper subgroups. Okay, or improper subgroups. Understood? Now, what is the identity group? Identity group is the group which has the element only as the identity of the main group. Okay, basically if you have the identity of G star to be E, then the subset of G which contains only E, which forms a group under the binary composition star, will form the identity subgroup. Okay, so these two groups are called trivial subgroups, and all other groups other than identity group and the group itself are called the proper subgroups of the main group. Got it? For example, basically we can say that this group is a subgroup of, so this is a multiplicative group of rationals and this is a multiplicative group of real numbers. So multiplicative group of rationals is a proper subgroup of additive multiplicative group of reals. Okay, understood? So this symbol is basically used when you are basically representing a proper subgroup. Okay, so use this symbol when you are representing a proper subgroup. Make it clear. Okay, acha, you have many more examples. For example, the additive group of rational number is again a subgroup of real numbers. Then you have the multiplicative group of non-zero rationals is a subgroup of the non-zero reals. Similarly, you have a group 1 minus 1, which this group is also called a cyclic group. Okay, rather we are not going into definition of that. Okay, I will be just giving you a small hint of what a cyclic group is. So this group under multiplication is a proper subgroup of the group 1 minus 1 I minus I. Understood? Acha, what is a cyclic group? If I would say, so cyclic groups are basically those particular groups all of which elements can be formed with a single element of the group. For example, suppose if we have a multiplicative group G star, then all the elements of G, okay, let me write it down, then all the elements of G will be, suppose like this, a to the power minus 3, a to the power minus 2, a to the power minus 1, 0, sorry, not 0, 1, 1, a square, and so on. So just carefully notice that every element of a group, they are the powers of the element A, right? So all the elements are formed from a single element of the group, that is A. And this sort of a group is known as a cyclic group. And this number or this element of the group A, whose powers are there in the group, or whose powers form the elements of the group, that particular element is called the generator of the group. Okay, that particular group is called the generator of the group. So this is the cyclic group 1 minus 1 and this group. Reason being key, see, if I talk about this group, cyclic groups are basically, often represented like this. So if I talk about this group, and we are told about under multiplication, right? So what happens, let's see, I square, you have 1, I to the power, so I square you have minus 1, I to the power 4 you have 1, and I to the power 3 you have minus I, right? So see, all the elements are formed from I. So I is the generator of the group, and this is the cyclic group. Similarly, if we talk about 1 minus 1, then we can say that minus 1 whole square is 1. So this is also cyclic group under multiplication, where generator of the group is minus 1. Got it? Similarly, if we would have had an additive group, then the elements would have been looked like minus 3a, minus 2a, minus a, 0a, 2a, 3a, and so on. That is under multiplicative group. A general element looks is in the form a to the power n, and in an additive group, cyclic group, it is given in the form na. Okay, n and n being in both cases integers. So got it, guys? Okay, so what is a complex? Let us move on to subgroup again. What is a complex? So a complex is a non-empty subset of a group, whether it is a subgroup or not. Okay, it doesn't care. A complex is any non-empty subset of a group, whether it is a subgroup or not. Okay, a complex is any non-empty subset of a group, whether it is a subset or not. Okay, so we have one more important example of subgroups. What is that? Let's see. See, we have studied about even permutations, right? We have also studied that of the n factorial permutations, n factorial over 2 permutations are even, right? And we have also studied there that the identity permutation is also even. Suppose we talk about the symmetric set Sn. What was the symmetric set Sn? The set containing all the permutations, of n symbols, right? Now suppose we form a group of Sn under multiplication. Okay, so we form a group of Sn under multiplication. Now carefully notice, now if we talk only about the even permutations, let's say that the set of all even permutations is given as E. Okay, now see, E is associative under multiplication because it is a subset of the symmetric set Sn. Clear? Similarly, if we multiply two even permutations, we get an even permutation. So we have a closure property here also. Thirdly, we have an identity permutation under the set of all even permutations. Okay, so identity also exists under star, that is the multiplication, as well as you have an inverse. You have an inverse of every permutation, right? You have an inverse of every element under the multiplication binary composition. Therefore, see, the set of all even permutations also forms a group under multiplication, right? And the set of all even permutations is a subgroup of the symmetric set Sn. Therefore, we can say that the set of all even permutations, the group formed the group of the even permutations under multiplication is a proper subgroup of the multiplicative group of symmetric set. Got it, guys? Clear till this much? Okay. So next we will be talking about theorems related to subgroups. Okay. So let us start with theorems. The first theorem says that the identity of a subgroup is the same as that of the group. Okay, now see, this is pretty easy to understand. We know that one particular group has one particular identity element, right? For example, a multiplicative group has its identity element 1 for all elements. The additive group has its identity element as 0 for all elements. So if we basically cut down a subset of the particular group, okay, if we cut down a subset of the particular group, then all the elements of of that particular subset are also elements of the superset, right? So actually what is happening, see, those elements which form the subgroup, they actually are having an identity element of what was there in the actual group itself. So they are carrying this identity element from the actual group to the subgroup itself, because they have only, all the elements are having only one identity element, right? Getting my point? Therefore it is very pretty easy to understand that the identity of a subgroup is the same as that of the group. Got it, guys? Clear? So this was the first theorem. What does the second theorem says? Let's see. So the second theorem says that the inverse of any element of a subgroup is the same as the inverse of the same element regarded as an element of the group. Understood? The inverse of any element of a subgroup is the same as the inverse of the same element regarded as an element of the group. This is also pretty easy to understand, right? We are carrying basically the same elements which form the group to a subgroup. So whatever inverse we had in the group, we are having the same inverse in the subgroup, right? Because the properties are being carried from the actual group to the subgroup itself. So next we talk about the third theorem. Okay. So the third theorem is very important. It says that the necessary and sufficient conditions that a non-empty subset S of a group G forms a subgroup under binary operation star in G are, first condition, if A belongs to S and B belongs to S, this implies A star B will be belonging to S. That is the closure property. Second says that if A belongs to S, okay, A belongs to S, then A inverse belongs to S. Getting it? Okay. So they are telling that these two conditions are the necessary and sufficient conditions for a non-empty subset S to be a subgroup of the subgroup of the group G. Before understanding the proof of this particular theorem, let us first understand what does this statement necessary and sufficient means. So basically, under mathematical proofs, there is two very important methods to prove a statement. One of them is called conditional operator or statement. Let it be conditional statement. And one is biconditional statement. Okay. Now, what is conditional statement? To understand these two statements, let us first understand what is a proposition. What is a proposition? So proposition is any statement. Proposition is any statement that has its answer in terms of yes or no. Okay. Proposition is any statement that has its answer in yes or no, or rather more appropriately true false. Okay. More appropriately true false, which has its answer in true false. For example, if I say that is today raining? So today is raining. Let's say today is raining. So what will be the answer, or what will be the reply of a person to whom this statement is said? Today is raining. So he will either say true or say no, today is not raining. Understood? These sorts of statements are called proposition, which has their answer in terms of true or false. Okay. And suppose we have two of these statements, A, B. We have two of these propositional statements, and we try to connect these statements. Okay. And we try to connect these statements. So we can connect these statements using this conditional and biconditional operation if we want to create a dependence. If we want to create a dependence of either the second statement on the first statement or both the statements on each other. For example, if I want to say that I have a proposition given, today is raining, and B we have, we go to party. Okay. We have two of these propositional statements. Now how can we join them? We can say that if today is raining, we go to party. But then we go to party. This is one form of creating a dependence. Other form can be if and only if today is raining, we go to party. Okay. Okay, so these are two ways in which we can create a dependence on the propositions. Okay. Now this first statement is called is basically known as a, now see, here we are, what we are doing, see, we are telling that if A is true, then B is true, right? If A is true, then B is true. And in second one, what we are telling, if and only if A is true, then B is true. This one, if and only if A is true, then B is true. So the first propositional joining is known as a conditional joining. Okay, understood? This symbol is known as a conditional operator. Okay, when we join two propositions using if and then we basically join them using this conditional operator. And when we join two statements using if and only if and then we call them biconditional operator. Not a single, this not given as a single but given as a double. Let's correct it. It's given like this. Okay, this is called a biconditional operator. Now when we have two propositions joined with a conditional operator, then A is called the necessary condition. A is called the necessary condition. Okay, and B is called the sufficient condition. Okay, when we are joined two propositions using conditional operator, the first proposition which we have, that is A here, is called the necessary condition, and the second proposition we have is the sufficient condition. But when we use a biconditional operator, there we have A, that is the first proposition, both as necessary as well as sufficient condition. Okay, A is both necessary as well as sufficient condition for this propositional statement. Getting it? This sort of statement is called a compound proposition. Okay, where two propositions are connected, those are called compound propositions. So now see what is the difference between conditional and biconditional operator. In mathematical proofs, we use these conditional statements. That is, for example, if I show you an example of this conditional operator proof, then I can show you that. For example, say we know that 2 is integer, right? We know that 2 is integer. So I can write that if 2 is integer, then 2 is rational. If 2 is integer, 2 is rational, right? Because all integers must be rational. So if 2 is integer, that is the necessary condition, then 2 is rational, that is the sufficient condition. But carefully notice in this statement, if 2 is rational, then from here we cannot say then 2 is integer, right? Because all rationals are not integer. Getting my point? If 2 is integer, 2 is rational. But if 2 is rational, 2 is not meant to be integer. So these sort of statements are conditional operated statements. Here we need to prove from only one side. See, here we just need to prove this part. And this part gets automatically proven, right? We just need to show 2 is an integer, and from there we can say that 2 is rational. So if, then, this is the main motto of the conditional operator. We just need to prove it from one particular direction. We prove it from this direction and we are done. We don't need to prove it from the reverse direction. But suppose we say that a number is even if it can be written in the form 2k, where k belongs to the set of integers. If we say this, suppose we say this, a number is said to be even if it can be written in the form of 2k, where k belongs to the set of integers. Now see, this statement needs to be proven from both sides. How? See, we first need to show that if the number, let's say n, is even, then n equals to 2k. Then we again need to show that if n equals to 2k, n is even. Getting it? Reason because, see, n being even is a sufficient as well as a necessary condition here. Okay. Here, if a number n is even, this is a proposition A, and it can be written in the form of 2k, this is the proposition B, then here A and B are connected it from both sides. Okay, so this is a biconditional statement. Here we need to prove it from both sides, that if n is even, n equal to 2k, if n equal to 2k, n is even, so that there is no loss of generality of the integers, of the even integers. So this is the difference between biconditional and conditional operator. And make sure that in some mathematical exam, if you are ever given a proof which has the statement necessary and sufficient, then do try to prove it, or not, do not try, you need to prove it from both sides. That is, from the first proposition towards the second proposition and back from the second to the first. Okay, so we got a bit deviated from our main topic, group theory. Okay, so this was important to tell. Guys, I'm ending this video right here because my viewers actually do not entertain such long videos. They might feel bored. So I will be bringing one more video on group theory, in which we will be ending this topic with, I guess, 4 more theorems, and cyclic group is the last topic left under group theory. So we will be doing that in the next video. So meet you guys in the next video.